China is experiencing its worst COVID outbreak in 2 years.
Cases have been at their highest since the days of the initial outbreak in Wuhan.
More than 50 million people are under lockdown. 50 million people in China locked down.
China reported 5,280 new cases on Tuesday.
Hi, welcome back to a new video. As you probably have seen on the news, COVID is back in China. So I decided to go out and talk a little bit about what the situation is like now, which cities are in lockdown, what it is like in Beijing, and I'm going to answer the question whether the COVID outbreak right now is a lot different from the first time we had COVID here. So, without further ado, let's get started. Depending on the news sources that you read or watch, you might think that the situation here in Beijing is pretty bad.
How bad is this outbreak? The worst ever. Worse than what we saw in Wuhan in 2020. This is China's worst Wuhan virus outbreak.
But actually, it is not. Especially not when I compare it to 2020 when we first met COVID. Back then, the city really got in lockdown and people were very worried. Now, people are not really that worried at all. For example, Didi drivers would kind of put up an enclosure of plastic so you would be really separated from them, and they would make you scan the QR codes for your health kit. That is all not happening right now. There's no plastic in the cars. Not all of the Didi drivers ask you to scan the QR code, and they're really not that worried. Another example is wearing masks. In the beginning of the outbreak 2 years ago, people were really worried about COVID, and everybody was wearing masks, and the policy of reinforcement was also quite strict. Everybody was wearing their masks all the time. Now it is kind of 50-50. Half of the people really are wearing their masks all the time, and the other half of the people are more relaxed about it. And here in the streets you can see that as well. Some people are wearing their masks when they walk outside, others are not. They're more relaxed about it. You might have heard on the news that Shenzhen went into a full lockdown and that everybody has to stay in their house for about a week.
Barbed wire separates neighborhoods in Shenzhen, a desperate attempt to keep a new wave of coronavirus infections in check.
That week is almost coming to an end. And when that week is over, the government will decide whether to extend that week or to relieve and end the lockdown. Media seems to be hyping up these stories. They say that the whole city went into lockdown, but what it really is that only a couple of hundred of people are infected with COVID and are sick. So really not the entire city is sick. That was a little bit about Shenzhen. Let's move to Shanghai because you have probably heard about COVID cases in Shanghai as well.
I have friends who I hung out with a few days ago but were suddenly quarantined recently. I think the Shanghai government does so to protect citizens. In the long run, it's good. Our school now only has online classes, but we couldn't go back home to our hometown.
Now in Shanghai, the situation is a bit different because there, mostly the schools are closing down and people are moving online. Students are having their classes at home online. In Beijing, the situation is a bit different. For example, at my school, we are not learning online yet. We are preparing for it though, because it can happen any moment with the zero COVID policy that China is still implementing. We are preparing for it, like I said, we are sending materials home with students, and we are now almost having a COVID test every week. So that is how we are getting ready. So when the media shows that all of China is under lockdown, cities are locked up from the world, that is really not the case. It is really only has to do with their precautions of wanting to avoid that it spreads out. That is the zero COVID policy that they're having. And that's why places are going into lockdown. It is not the case that people are all sick and down with COVID.
However, that being said, during most parts of the city, life goes on as normal. Restaurants are open, even bars are open. So it's really a very interesting situation right now.
That was a bit about what is happening in the different cities and here in Beijing. But what I also want to share is how it is affecting me personally. Because this situation has been going on for 2 years now, and that means I haven't been able to travel to the Netherlands to see my family, or we haven't been able to travel to the States to see Miguel's family, which is really starting to take a toll on us. It's hard not being able to see your family for such a long time. And the thing is, we don't know when we will be able to see our family members. it could be another year before we can travel. We can technically leave the country, but coming back is the hard part. With rules and policies changing all the time, one day they are saying, well, China's going to open up and soon there might be changes, but then a week later, things are back to where they were and you don't have any idea of when things are changing. And even if you have the opportunity to leave the country for a bit, it's really hard to come back because rules are changing all the time. And that is really the frustrating part. I understand China has their zero COVID policy, which was a really good policy at the beginning of the outbreak, but now we're 2 years in and they still have that policy. And personally, I think it's time to let go of that policy and just accept that COVID is going to be here. Other countries are moving on, but China is still closed off for most of the people, which is really frustrating. And yeah, it's hard. I'm not just thinking about myself in this perspective, I'm also thinking about China as a country, because other countries are moving on and 2 years later China is still at the same point. We know a lot more about COVID. We have vaccinations that a lot of people have had. We know how COVID develops. So you have to think about how it's affecting the country. The economy is being held back. It's not growing as much as it could.
Now China is really struggling to get a zero strategy continuing, and they're doing it, the things that they are doing is locking down, and that's affecting economic growth. We saw the projections coming in lower than were anticipated, and so now she is making some adjustments, saying for the first time that he is going to take into account economic implications.
Domestic travel is very limited, and that's a big part of the economy here. So this zero COVID policy has a lot of effects on the country. So the question really is, should they continue to have a zero case policy or not? What do you think? Should China change its policies? Should they open up and accept that COVID is here to stay and release some of the restrictions of entering the country, the lockdowns, quarantines? Or do you think the zero COVID policy is a good policy and they should continue to have this policy? Let me know in a comment, because I'm curious to hear your perspective. So this was a bit about the COVID situation here right now, in my opinion, how I feel about it. And as you can see behind me, people are out here. It's really not that bad as the media wants you to think and wants you to believe. And a lot of people only read the headlines and don't really look at the numbers of what is happening. People here are not too concerned. They're just going on with their daily lives. I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you did so, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!